we go.
Got it. Got it.
All right, take it away.
Everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
All right. So, hello, I'm Austin Woods, and today I'm going to talk you through OAuth 2.0. We'll start about talking about what OAuth is and its components, and then we'll look at an app and see how it's built. Then we'll talk about OAuth 2.0's flow and how it's implemented in our app. OAuth 2.0 is a protocol that allows applications to securely access the resources of a user on behalf of that user without requiring the user to share their credentials, such as username and password, directly with the application. TLDR, sign in without using your password or username. Today, we're going to use it to create personal Google Calendar events through a home-built app.
I have a question.
Yes?
Who are you? Can you give us like a 30-second sentence about yourself? And
Yeah. Hi, I'm Austin, and I go to Turing Bootcamp right now for Ruby on Rails. I built quite a few projects. One of the most recent projects that I built, we implemented OAuth, and so I learned a little bit about it, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So I thought this presentation would be a good way to do that.
Cool. Thanks.
No problem. Okay, so what are the core components of OAuth? Well, first we have the resource owner. The resource owner is the user that owns the data or resources that the third-party application wants to access. Then we have the client. The client is a third-party application or service that wants to access the user's resources. It needs to be registered with the authorization server and is issued a unique client identifier, potentially a client secret. We have the authorization server. This is the server that authenticates the user and issues access tokens to authorized clients. It acts as an intermediary between the resource owner and the client. Then we have the resource server. This is the server that is hosting the protected user resources and when the client wants to access. It validates the access token and grants or denies access to the requested resources. And then we have the access token, which is a short-lived credential that the client receives from the authorization server after the user grants permission. The client uses this token to access the user's resources on the resource server. And then on the slides right here, I've got just a quick breakdown of what our project components are. So you'll see that the resource owner is going to be the user. The client is our or your app. The authorization server is Google OAuth. The resource server is Google Calendar. And then our access token, we're going to use that to authenticate when we create Google Calendar events. So what is the OAuth flow? Well, first we have client registration. Okay, this is when the client registers with the authorization server, providing information about itself and its intended use. So we'll do this with Google API, and we'll create our OAuth credentials, and we'll enable some APIs, and that's going to allow us to actually interact with Google OAuth. Authorization request, the client initiates this process by sending the user to the authorization server's authorization endpoint. The user is prompted to log in and grant permission to the client. So this is like a pop-up screen that the user gets where they'll authenticate themselves and allow the app to use their Google Calendar resources. User authentication and consent. The user authenticates themselves and gives consent to the client. The authorization server generates an authorization code or an access token, depending on the flow being used. Today, it will be generating an authorization code for us, and then we'll fetch an access token with that authorization code. Token exchange. The client exchanges the authorization code for an access token and possibly a refresh token. The access token is then used to make a request to the resource server. So I'll show you a breakdown of how we're doing that today. And then accessing resources. The client sends the access token and its request to the resource server to access the user's resources. This is just us authenticating the client and saying that, hey, we have permission to use this user's Google Calendar, and we're going to create an event with that access. Token expiry and refresh. Access tokens have a limited lifespan. When they expire, the client can use a refresh token, if provided, to obtain a new access token without requiring user interaction. And I'll show you how we did that today in our app as well. So browser and code demonstration. Before we go into like the technicalities of each step of this flow, I just wanted to show you what our app does, what it looks like, and then we can break it down a little bit further. So let's go to our localhost server here. We're running the app. This is the home screen. We're just going to click create Google event. This brings us to the OAuth of authentication screen where we have to consent. So we'll select my account. And then we're brought to this simple form. So we'll create something called Austin's event. This is the description. Set the time for tomorrow at 5:30. Then we'll set the end date for tomorrow an hour ahead of 6:30, and then create event. Okay, and then if we go here, we see that Austin's event has been created with this as a description. And so that's how our app works, and that's how it interacts. So let's look at some of the code. Okay, so for this project, we're using the Google API client gem, and we're requiring Google API's calendar v3. So if you want to copy this project, you'll have to use that gem. Here's our welcome page. It's just a simple link with create Google event, and it goes to our OAuth path. Here's our form where we just fill it out. It's very basic. And if we look at the meat and potatoes of what's going on in our controller, you'll see that for the OAuth path, we are creating a client with client options, which are listed down below, that contain our secret and client ID, as well as some authorization and token credential URIs. We insert a scope for what we want to use. So this is just saying what particular API of Google's we're wanting to use. And then we have a redirect, which we call callback. So once we pass those options into the client, we call on the authorization URI. We allow other hosts true, and this is what actually is redirecting us to the OAuth consent screen once we click create Google event. Then we have the callback. So once we're at Google's website and it's wanting us to consent to the app using Google's resources for the user, it brings us back to our client. And this is what the callback action is. So we have our client here that we're creating. We're passing in the same client options, except for now we have a client code from our authentication process. So we set that equal to params code, into the parameters of the code that we got. And then we get our response, and we're setting our response equal to our access token, which we're fetching. And then for the session authorization, we're setting it equal to the response, which is right here, and then redirecting to the new event path. So simply, we're just setting our access token equal to this session right here. Then we get to the create action. We're updating our client that we just created with our access token. We're creating a new calendar service, and then we're authorizing that calendar service with our updated client that now has the access token on it. We're doing some time formatting here. Google is very particular about their times. This is the format version right here, RFC 3339. We pass those times into our event here, which we're creating a Google API event. We have a start, end, summary, and description. And then we're going to insert that event on the primary calendar, which is just the main calendar. The primary is a keyword here. And then we'll insert our event that we're creating right here, where we're setting out the attributes of. Okay, and then for rescue, this is if we get an authorization error. So we'll get an authorization error if our access token expires. So if our access token expires, we want to refresh using our refresh token. And then we're just updating our session with the response for that refresh, and then we'll retry the action. And that's the main meat and potatoes of what's going on here. And let's break it down a little bit further. and talk about each step of the flow. That way we have a good understanding of it. So OAuth flow client registration. So here we're going to go to the Google API and we'll register for an OAuth 2.0 credential. We can do that by going here. We create a project first. I've called mine Google OAuth test. We'll click on create credentials right here and we'll create our OAuth 2.0 client IDs. These IDs come with a client ID and a client secret that are important to have. And then we have to authorize our redirect URI specifically. So we can't redirect to just anything. We have to register our callback. This is so the Google server knows where to bring us back in the app. This is our OAuth consent screen. We are in testing. In order to publish your app, you have to be like accepted through Google, and that can take like a week or two, I think. It may take longer. I have never done it before. But it does take some time because Google has to authorize your server in order to use like a publish thing. So my user type is external because I'm not a Google Workspace user. Making it internal will make you use Google Workspaces. And then I have to specifically label my test users since we're not published and we're also external. So here I just put my own email address, and this is the only user that can use the OAuth process right now. And then you'll get like some token rates and stuff like that from other places. In order to enable any APIs, you go to enabled API and services. You can either search for the different APIs, but you'll see here I have Google Calendar enabled. You have to enable each API that you want to use for your OAuth, otherwise it's not going to work. So be sure to enable your APIs and which ones you want, and that way you can interact. So this is the client registration process. This process is where the client registers with the authorization server, providing information about itself and its intended use. Okay, authorization request. The client initiates this process by sending the user to the authorization server's authorization endpoint. The user is prompted to log in and grant permission to the client. Here, we're creating a client, and then we're redirecting to its authorization URI. And this is the screen that we got to earlier, where the user authentication happens. This happens on Google's server, so it does not happen on our own personal server. User authentication and consent. The user authenticates themselves and gives consent to the client. The authorization server generates an authorization code or an access token, depending on the flow being used. So this is the authorization screen again. And then here we're calling on the client. We're saying that the client.code equals the params code. So we're passed in a parameter on our callback that has the code that we can use to fetch an access token. So we're just saying that equal to our client attribute code. OAuth flow token exchange. The token exchange is when the client exchanges the authorization code for an access token and possibly a refresh token. The access token is used to make a request to the resource server. Here we're creating a client. We're setting our client's code equal to the access code. Or authorization code, sorry, and then we're fetching an access token with that authorization code and setting it equal to a session. So this is just the token exchange process right here.
I have a question.
Yeah.
The params there, is that grabbing from the URL or from the request that's coming back, or is it some global variable?
So that's the response that we're getting from Google. So when it goes to our callback, we're getting a response from Google, and that response contains params code.
Okay.
Google is through that callback endpoint, Google is actually making a request to your app, correct? With the code.
I think so. It's either a response or a request, but I think it's it's actually a request because it's on the authorization server, and then it's requesting the callback. So you're brought back to this action, and then in this action we have a redirect to like our form or something like that.
Right, so Google is redirecting the user back to our app.
Remember
Right.
when you're gonna clear the URL for the callback?
Mhm.
I'm
That's
sorry, I
what-
didn't hear you.
I was just saying that when you declare the callback URL in the Google interface, that's the URL you're pointing it to, and then it's appending query string variables to it.
So usually it connects and it puts like the token in the URL itself,
Mhm.
but here are they like redirecting to the URL, but then putting it in the body of the
No.
request? Or it's in the URL?
Probably in
Query string variables come through params as well.
Okay. So it comes in the URL.
But your code isn't your actual access token, it's, the code is being exchanged through your OAuth client to get the access token.
Right, yeah, so this params code here is our authorization code. It is not our access token. We have to do client.fetch access token to exchange our code for an access token. An access
Okay.
token usually lasts about an hour, for Google at least. It's different for different services.
Yeah.
It's like the arcade. You give them money, they
Yeah,
give you a thing, then you gotta put the thing in the machine.
yeah. And you can use the same code to fetch the access token again when you need.
Is this a Rails app?
Yeah, this is a Rails app.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay, so that's the token exchange. Now we'll do accessing resources. The client sends the access token in its request to the resource server to access the user's resources. Here we're using the session that we set to update our client with the access token. So you'll see we set this equal to response that we showed in the last slide. And then we're updating our client right here with our authorization, which is our access token. And then we're authorizing the service that we created, service.authorization equals client, and the client has the updated access token. So we're authorizing our service with the client, which has the access token. Token expiry and refresh. Access tokens have a limited lifespan. When they expire, the client can use a refresh token if provided to obtain a new access token without requiring user interaction. Here we're rescuing from an authorization error, from an expired token, and updating our session with the new access token. Google access tokens typically expire after 1 hour.
Okay, so you don't even notify the user, you just automatically refresh and then make the request that you need to.
Right, yeah, don't even notify them. Just go ahead and refresh it, and it doesn't require any user interaction or input either. So it happens without them knowing.
You mentioned a refresh token, where is that retrieved? Because it might all be within the client.
So when we fetch the access token right here, we actually obtain our refresh token as well. We're exchanging this authorization code for both the access token and the refresh token. So when we go down here, we call client refresh after setting our update for the access token right here. We're actually updating with both our refresh token and access token. So we can call client.refresh here, and we can use that refresh token to just merge our response or merge our session.
Can I see the line where you're setting authorization from the callback? So the response, if we were to look at that response later, that would contain both the access and the refresh token.
Yeah, hold on. Let me get through this last slide and then we'll look at that. Is that okay?
Yeah, on the
You're
prior.
gonna do it live, man.
Okay, so further learning. So some things that you can learn that I haven't gone over. This presentation has been very bare bones and very focused on just kind of getting it done and understanding like kind of what's going on, but it doesn't really talk about a lot of things. So some further learning that you can look at is the difference between OAuth 1.0 and 2.0. You can implement it with different gems like OmniAuth or Devise. You can learn about the different grant types, which change the different flows that OAuth has. And then you can consider storing your tokens in a JSON web token. And that is everything that I have to show for OAuth.
One more question.
Yeah.
Does that framework that you're using for doing OAuth 2.0, does it support the Pasado token?
The what?
The Pasado token.
I'm not familiar with that. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's a newer formed type of access token that actually has some meta information embedded into it. It's fairly new. I think it's only been out for a couple of years. I was just curious whether or not that framework supported
Is
it.
that similar to JWTs where you can decode them and get like that?
It's like a
Yeah.
step above JWTs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does anyone know like implicit flow? Like this seemed to me like implicit flow. Does anyone know if that, like that?
I know
that's-
there's
This
like-
was authorization code flow. Implicit flow involves using JavaScript on the front end. So this was actually an authorization code grant, I believe.
I'll have to look it up because it just feels very similar to this. Where you're like exchanging a code like via the URL, but okay. Cool. Okay, authorization code grant, someone said in the chat. Cool. Well, it seemed pretty easy to do. So that's really exciting. That just shows
So
like-
we've hit our pry and our controller. And if we call in response, you'll see that the refresh token is in here,
But I
as
see
well as
it
the
gives
access token. What's that?
Yeah, I see it even gives you the expires and like, I guess that's how many seconds that the access token will live.
Right. And then I'm not sure about the lifetime of a refresh token, but I do know that we get it in this response.
I remember they're considerably longer, but, like you could. Different ways to handle that. He's saying if you get an authorization error, go ahead and refresh, but you could. Also, just every interaction, look at that payload to see how many seconds has it been.
Yeah,
before you send
And
that.
then if it's within some range, you just be like, I'm just gonna refresh. There's different ways to handle that.
yeah, I just, excuse me, I just know a while ago where, service we were consuming, the refresh token would last 100 days, actually like 180 days. And then after that time, the user would have to reauthorize their app, but, we would capture the timestamp of when they authorize and then, actually deauthorize them and send our users an alert when that, at that, I guess, the 3-month threshold.
Austin, can you, show the actual client that you're using? I couldn't remember what it was. I just remember Signet.
Google API client.
Okay, that's what I thought. So that one, regarding your question about the other token, because it's a Google client that he's using.
Mhm.
That's using OAuth, it may be very specific of what it uses based on what Google uses in their APIs. But the generic OAuth client probably has more tokens.
Yeah, I've used Google's APIs before with this version of OAuth. I was just curious whether or not the client side framework ever supported the Pasado token.
I think
I could look it up.
I think there was a chat message. I think someone said in the chat that it was the Paseo.
Oh, good.
They like looked it up.
Yeah.
Also, apologies if this is like outside the scope, but do you know by chance if there's a way, I guess within your context here, is there a way to invalidate the Google token? Like, can the user go to their Google account and like disconnect the various apps that are connected to it?
So I do believe, like, if we look at my emails quick, which maybe this is a horrible thing to screen share. Actually, let me look at for the email first while I share my screen.
Wait, screenshot. It's on video.
Uh, see, you can get an email from Google saying that it was granted access to your Google account. And
We
then
can see those lines. Okay.
if you check activity, it'll just show you some basic things like if you did grant access, someone else can use, no secure account. Yes, it was me. I don't want to click
Also,
any of these
I
options.
don't know if you're sharing the right screen. I think
Yeah,
you
you
did
showed
your
the
search in
slide.
your email on camera and now you're on the other screen. Is it, maybe I'm not following?
Okay.
I think we get the point though. I don't think it matters.
I made this just.
Oh, okay. I was sharing the wrong screen. My bad. Yeah. So this OAuth test, you can secure account or say yes, it was me. I don't want to do any of these options on screen, but it's possible to do some type of action from Google, and you do get notifications when you consent through OAuth.
Cool. So now you could hire you could have an army of people join your app to set up calendars on your email.
Yep,
This
I
is-
think you can get 10,000 tokens per month, I believe is the limit.
No, just one token and have an army of people just manage your calendar. It's like the most passive aggressive
per
way
day.
to the secretary.
Well, so he's authenticating, he has to log in,
Okay,
so
yeah.
it would be his calendar.
Oh, yeah, because they'd have to have the Google sign in.
Right, you have to have a different type of token that's a
Yeah.
system user.
Okay.
To be able to act on behalf of someone.
Oh, so this can work for any Google account, I guess.
Yeah, so earlier I was talking about the credentials. So where is it? The consent screen. So you have to like publish your app if you want just anybody to be able to use it. Otherwise, when you're in the testing status, you have to manually list your users by their email. And then you have 100 user cap when you're in testing.
Nice.
So these test users are these are the users that are currently added or are currently authorized to use
Right.
the app?
Currently, the only people that can use my OAuth screen is people with the email austinwoods99@gmail.com. So that's the only Google account that can authorize and use this app through OAuth.
So are you gonna try to set up any other services? Or can you do a lot of different Google services now with that same?
Oh, there's more Google API services than you can think. Let's see, we can look at some of them. If I understand how to navigate through this UI.
I think it's just below.
Yeah, but there's like YouTube API, cloud, page speed, and there's like a fitness API. I mean, every Google product has an API. So there's plenty of APIs that you can enable on this. And then you can limit your scope for the things that you're doing. Let me see if I can find the scope screen. I think when you enable the API itself, you have to set the scope. I'm sorry, I don't know where it is on the screen, but yeah, you can enable a certain scope. So you could say like I only want to be able to read calendars through this API. You can say I only want to be able to edit calendars. I don't want to be able to read calendars through this API. So there's that like flexibility in keeping your account as secure as possible, or your your API usage is as focused as possible. That way, you know, malactants can't do something with it.
What happens if you edit app?
I believe this is just like my app name. Oh no, here we go, scopes.
Voila.
So yeah, here we go. So you see for my scope, I only have see, create, change, and delete events in Google Calendars you own. So when we authorize through OAuth, these are the only things that I'm going to be able to do with that authorized user's resources, and it's going to be under the Google Calendar API.
Okay, cool.
I don't know if you can answer this, Austin, more for the room. So like I've seen sites, like I have a site I go to, when I go to log in, it asks me if I want to log in using Google, Facebook, something else, or email. And I don't use those other ones, I use email. So are they, those other three choices, for example, other than email, are they doing something similar? Are they using OAuth? So if I were using Google, Facebook, or Instagram,
Yeah, so they're using OAuth and they're probably using a non-sensitive scope. Or maybe it is a sensitive scope, but the OAuth is scoped to be able to read your user information. So maybe it's reading your email address, your name, possibly other personal information that's listed on your Google account, and then they're creating a user for you based upon that OAuth information that they get. So it is OAuth that they're bringing you through or to sign in.
okay.
Hey,
Okay.
Austin, do you know how to like sign out and re-sign back in to your OAuth in your app? I just want to see the loading screen to see like what it says there. Okay, so it doesn't say like it's gonna access your calendar. It doesn't give you like
So
a
I've already authenticated before while testing this app. So it doesn't say that, but it does say here, we can do this with a different person. And I'll show you what it says.
Cool. Because I know sometimes when I sign in, like John's talking about, it will say like, we're not going to use your personal information in the message that I'm using in the app itself. But
So it'll let you know that this app hasn't been verified. It's only in testing stage. We'll continue. And then it says, hey, this is what it wants to do. It wants to see, edit, share, and permanently delete all calendars that you're accessing through Google Calendar. So this is wrong because I didn't ask. Well, no, because you can look at the different calendars. That's right. So I can't see your calendar events, but I can see what calendars you have. Like, so if you had like a holidays calendar or something. So make sure you trust, and this is the screen it gives you just to verify that, you know, this is what it's doing to your account. Click continue. See in the response, we get our refresh token, our access token. They were brought to our form.
it works.
It works.
So if you were to change the scopes, your API key, does that invalidate the token? You have to like reauthorize?
So earlier we got to the scopes by editing our app. So we may have to create a separate client ID and a separate OAuth credential if we want to. Let's see what it says.
Let's try to add Google Docs.
Okay,
It says add or remove. Like, what's that number one? Google Sheets? Sheets? Or maybe just Sheets? Or just Docs? I don't know.
Let's just do
Or-
cloud data store, because I can't find anything else. Update, save and continue. Set
Okay.
testing, save and continue.
Okay, so all we have to do is create an event and see if it still works.
Okay. I think it's gonna work though.
Yeah, but I think doing it this way, you're doing what Ryan said of signing back in.
Well, the same token is in the session. So,
Because he's signing into a different account.
I don't know why it's taking so long.
are you still in your private?
No, it's not hitting the pry.
Maybe go to open up the network. Or kill the server and restart the server.
You do control D here, does it do anything? They
No,
sometimes will-
Control C is not doing anything.
Okay,
Server's already running.
Okay, it's I'm gonna have to kill this. I mean,
Can't have a successful demo without a bug during your live demo.
that's the truth.
I do love the brutalist style, by the way. Like, well done. You just need like some powder blue in there.
yeah, it works.
Cool beans.
Sweet.
Anyone else have any questions?
I thought that was cool.
Yep.
You're gonna have to. I'm gonna have to get all my Google services set up now.
Yeah, the Google registration is actually not that bad. Like they throw a lot of documentation at you, which can overwhelm you at first, but if you read through it, you realize that everything is in like a lot of detail, so you know exactly what to do. It's a little bit everywhere, as far as like where the settings are. You got to get used to that. But other than that, it's pretty easy to set up and it's free. So
Not a question directly related to your demo, but just curiosity on my part for your bootcamp through Turing. Do you have to do like presentations like this?
so we do project presentations, which are I usually create slides because I like having slides to organize my thoughts. So we do presentations on projects, but I would say that this is probably the longest one I've done. Usually the project presentations for our projects are like 10 minutes.
Okay, because I mean, it seems like you've done these before. That's why I was kind of asking. And it's not always easy getting in front of people and talking, but I think you did pretty dang good there.
Yeah, I was very nervous at first. I just needed to get into the flow of it, and then
Yep.
I got a lot better.
Understood.
Thank you
think
for
you
the
did great.
compliment though.
Sure.
Yeah, he wants to know your secret.
Yes, because I'm horrible at presentations.
I practiced it probably like 2 or 3 times before I actually gave it. That might help.
It's all good. Is it okay to stop recording now?
Yeah, I think so.